The morning sun often rises over the pristine, manicured greens of the world's most exclusive golf courses with a serene, almost predictable perfection. For decades, this world of immaculate fairways and hushed, respectful galleries was the natural domain of a man who did not merely play the sport, but completely redefined it for a global audience. When we think of unmatched dominance, relentless dedication, and the ultimate triumph of the human spirit over physical adversity, one particular name inevitably commands the entire narrative. Yet, behind the glittering trophies, the historic multi-million-dollar endorsements, and the thunderous applause of millions of fans worldwide, lies a parallel narrative that is far more complex, deeply turbulent, and shrouded in an intense personal struggle that the cameras rarely capture. The journey of an elite athlete is almost never a straight line, but rather a series of soaring peaks and devastating valleys that test the absolute limits of psychological endurance and physical resilience. It is a story that reminds us how the very qualities that make someone an unstoppable force in the public eye can sometimes become the heaviest burdens to carry when the stadium lights finally go down and the crowds disappear. To truly understand the gravity of recent events, we must first allow ourselves to look beyond the carefully crafted headlines and look deeper into the heavy atmosphere of a high-stakes life lived entirely under the unyielding glare of microscopic public scrutiny. If you want to follow every twist and turn of this gripping unfolding drama and stay updated on the world's most compelling stories as they happen, please take a brief moment right now to hit the subscribe button and turn on all your notifications. The latest chapter in this monumental saga began to unfold quietly far away from the familiar, sun-drenched landscapes of the American South, transitioning instead to the highly exclusive, intensely private sanctuaries of Western Europe. High in the serene, snow-capped peaks and tranquil valleys of Switzerland, a country globally renowned for its absolute discretion and world-class medical institutions, the legendary athlete had sought refuge from the chaotic storm that had suddenly engulfed his life back home. For nearly 3 long months, the quiet corridors of a premier Swiss rehabilitation center served as the backdrop for a deeply personal and intensive process of recovery. Away from the relentless flashbulbs of the paparazzi and the constant chatter of sports commentators, this was not merely a physical retreat, but a vital period of structured isolation designed to help a champion rebuild himself from the inside out after a series of overwhelming personal and legal crises. The decision to cross an ocean in search of healing spoke volumes about the sheer scale of the challenges he was facing, suggesting that the familiar surroundings of his everyday life had become too cluttered with distractions and painful reminders to allow for true, uninterrupted rehabilitation. In these secluded European facilities, the focus is always entirely on restoration, balancing the delicate management of chronic physical pain with the intense mental conditioning required to face an uncertain future. For 12 weeks, the global sporting community could only wonder and speculate about what was happening behind those closed doors, waiting anxiously for any sign or word regarding the progress of a man who had spent his entire life overcoming seemingly impossible odds. That period of quiet speculation came to an abrupt and dramatic end on a recent Friday when a sleek, familiar private aircraft taxied down a runway in Switzerland, signaling the conclusion of this international chapter of his recovery journey. The transition from the peaceful Swiss sanctuary back to the high-pressure environment of the United States was executed with the clinical precision typical of a global superstar's inner circle, yet it could not entirely escape the watchful eyes of investigative journalists. As the private jet climbed into the European sky, embarking on a long transatlantic flight back to the United States, it carried a man who was returning to a reality that had been drastically altered during his absence. The flight itself represented a critical threshold, a literal and symbolic crossing from a protective, controlled environment back into the unforgiving arena of public judgment and pending legal accountability. For a public figure of this magnitude, every movement is tracked, every flight plan is analyzed, and the simple act of returning home becomes a major news event capable of generating waves of intense discussion across multiple media platforms. The anticipation building on the other side of the Atlantic was palpable, as reporters and dedicated fans alike prepared for the first glimpse of the golfer since he had vanished from the public eye to confront his inner demons. The destination for this high-stakes return was none other than a highly secure private airport, located in the affluent coastal enclave of Jupiter, Florida, a region that has long served as a primary hub for the world's elite golfing community. As the private aircraft finally touched down on the tarmac, the atmosphere was thick with tension, and the waiting cameras were able to capture the historic first images of the five-time Masters Tournament champion stepping back onto American soil. Dressed in understated clothing that seemed intentionally chosen to deflect attention, he disembarked from the aircraft and proceeded directly through the mandatory customs clearance procedures before finally making his way toward a waiting vehicle. The photographs captured a man who appeared deeply focused, perhaps reflecting the immense weight of the unresolved issues that were waiting for him the moment his feet touched the ground in Florida. This arrival marked the official end of his scheduled 3-month rehabilitation stint, a timeline that close insiders had previously indicated was the original target for his comprehensive treatment program. The successful completion of this initial phase was a significant milestone, yet anyone familiar with the intricate realities of recovery understood that stepping off that plane was not the end of the journey, but rather the beginning of an entirely new and far more challenging phase of his personal and professional life, as the vehicle drove away from the private airport towards his heavily guarded residence. The immediate relief of being back home was undoubtedly tempered by the realization that the peace of Switzerland had been left far behind. The source close to the athlete had previously noted that he was doing the absolute best he could under an extraordinary amount of pressure, navigating a complex web of intense physical healing and daunting legal complications. The stress of managing chronic, debilitating pain while simultaneously preparing for a looming battle in the legal system is a burden that would test the resolve of any individual, let alone a global icon whose every misstep is dissected by millions. The determination to return to the sport he loves remains the central driving force in his life, an unyielding ambition that refuses to be extinguished by recent setbacks. However, achieving that goal will require an incredibly delicate balance of precise pain management and a rigorous, sustainable fitness routine that can withstand the intense demands of professional golf. The road ahead is universally acknowledged by his inner circle to be exceptionally tough, yet it is a path he is completely committed to walking, driven by the same competitive fire that once allowed him to conquer the sporting world. With his next critical court date, scheduled to take place on July 7th, the clock is ticking, and the fragile peace he achieved in the mountains of Switzerland will now be put to the ultimate test in the coming weeks. The tranquil and pristine image of the coastal paradise of Jupiter Island, Florida, was shattered into pieces in the late-night hours of March 27th, marking the beginning of a chaotic sequence of events that would eventually lead a global sports icon to a secluded medical facility in the heart of Europe. To fully comprehend the sheer scale of the crisis that erupted that night, one must visualize the dark, empty roads of this exclusive enclave, where the silence is usually only broken by the gentle rustle of palm trees and the distant crashing of Atlantic waves. It was on this deceptive stretch of asphalt that the five-time Masters Tournament champion experienced a terrifying and highly destructive single-vehicle rollover crash that instantly triggered a massive emergency response. When the first law enforcement officers arrived at the scene of the accident, they discovered a heavily damaged luxury vehicle and a situation that was rapidly spiraling out of control, far beyond a simple traffic mishap. The initial physical evidence at the crash site pointed to a severe loss of control, with the vehicle having careened off the roadway and rolled over, a frightening scenario that could have easily resulted in fatal consequences for anyone inside the cabin. As the responding deputies approached the prominent athlete, they immediately began conducting a standard preliminary assessment to determine the underlying cause of the violent collision, searching for answers in the darkness of the Florida night, according to the official detailed police reports that were later compiled and released to the public. The iconic golfer exhibited multiple undeniable signs of significant impairment during his initial face-to-face interactions with law enforcement on the scene. His speech was reportedly slurred, his movements were markedly sluggish, and he struggled significantly to maintain his balance while attempting to perform basic instructions provided by the deputies. Given these highly alarming physical observations, the officers moved forward with standard protocol, administering a breathalyzer test right there at the roadside to check for the presence of alcohol in his system. The results of the breathalyzer test came back completely negative, showing a 0.0 alcohol content, a surprising development that immediately shifted the focus of the investigation away from alcohol consumption and toward other potential sources of impairment. Seeking further clarity to explain the driver's profound disorientation, the authorities requested a comprehensive urinalysis test, a routine legal procedure designed to detect the presence of controlled substances or prescription medications. In a move that would significantly complicate his legal standing and escalate the severity of the charges against him, the athlete firmly declined to submit to this chemical test, an act that under Florida law carries automatic and severe administrative penalties. The situation grew even more serious and legally perilous when deputies conducted a lawful search and discovered two distinct white pills concealed inside his side paw, NT's pocket, a critical piece of physical evidence that changed the entire trajectory of the arrest. These mysterious medications were later carefully analyzed and definitively determined by forensic experts to be hydrocodone, a highly potent and tightly regulated narcotic pain reliever frequently prescribed for severe chronic physical trauma. The discovery of this powerful prescription opioid offered a troubling explanation for the profound physical impairment witnessed by the officers, suggesting a dangerous intersection between a desperate attempt at personal pain management and the operation of a heavy motor vehicle. Unable to safely allow the driver to return home, law enforcement officially placed the legendary golfer under arrest, charging him with operating a motor vehicle under the influence of intoxicating substances and a separate charge of refusal to submit to a lawful chemical test. The five-time Masters champion was handcuffed and transported directly to the local Martin County Jail, an institutional environment that stood in stark and sobering contrast to the ultra-luxury estates and private clubs he usually frequented. He spent several agonizing hours being processed through the standard corrections system, experiencing the humbling reality of a booking photograph and a jail cell before finally being released in the quiet, chilly wee hours of the morning on March 28. The public fallout from the arrest was immediate, thunderous, and global, with every major news network and social media platform dissecting the disturbing details of the rollover crash and the subsequent jail booking. Just days after his stressful release from custody, legal representatives for the athlete entered an official plea of not guilty on his behalf to the misdemeanor charges of driving under the influence with property damage and the refusal to submit to a lawful test. This formal legal maneuver signaled that despite the extensive and incriminating details contained within the police reports, the defense team was fully prepared to contest the state's case in a court of law. The upcoming court date was officially set for July 7th, creating a definitive and high-stakes deadline that loomed large over every aspect of the golfer's life as he began his journey toward personal recovery. The intense psychological pressure generated by this impending legal battle was immense, as a conviction could carry serious long-term consequences for both his personal freedom and his highly lucrative professional brand. It was against this backdrop of intense public scrutiny and mounting legal stress that the original decision was made to remove him entirely from the United States and place him in a 3-month intensive rehabilitation program in Switzerland, while public and the media remained intensely focused on the legal technicalities and the sensational nature of the car accident. A far more poignant and human drama was unfolding behind the scenes within his inner circle. Throughout his entire demanding stay at the Swiss rehabilitation facility, the golfer was reportedly in constant, daily communication with his dedicated girlfriend, Vanessa Trump, who was simultaneously facing her own monumental life crisis back in America. In May, just a couple of months after the athlete's traumatic arrest, Vanessa had courageously announced to the world her own personal battle with breast cancer, a devastating medical diagnosis that placed an unimaginable emotional burden on the entire family. Despite being separated by an entire ocean and thousands of miles of geographic distance, the couple maintained an incredibly strong, unbreakable emotional bond, sharing the intimate details of their daily struggles and victories via long-distance phone calls. Insiders close to the family revealed that they talked constantly, leaning heavily on one another for strength as they both attempted to navigate their respective paths to healing and recovery during the darkest period of their lives together. The image of a global sporting icon battling dependency and chronic pain in a Swiss clinic while his partner fought a life-threatening illness in America painted a picture of profound vulnerability that deeply touched those closest to them. The depth of the golfer's commitment to his family was vividly demonstrated when he made the difficult decision to briefly pause his intensive medical treatment in Switzerland to fly back to the United States to be physically present by Vanessa's side during some of her most critical health struggles. This brief hiatus from rehab underscored his role as a deeply caring, supportive family man who refused to allow his own personal recovery to completely overshadow the immediate, urgent needs of the woman he loved. Furthermore, Close sources emphasize that his decision to temporarily return was also driven by a strong desire to provide emotional support to Vanessa's daughter, Kai Trump, with whom the legendary athlete had grown incredibly close since he and Vanessa first began dating in early 25. Over the course of their relationship, he had taken on a meaningful, protective role in young Kai's life, and he felt a profound sense of responsibility to ensure she felt safe, secure, and loved while her mother underwent grueling cancer treatments. This complex web of deep family obligations, severe health crises, and looming legal battles created a pressure cooker environment that few ordinary human beings could ever hope to survive, let alone conquer. As the date for his mandatory court appearance on July 7th draws closer, the incredible tension surrounding his return to Florida continues to build, leaving the world to wonder how this embattled champion will find the strength to face his judgment day. To understand why this latest chapter in Florida is so heavy with consequence, one must look at the long, turbulent history of a man whose relationship with automobiles and physical trauma has been a recurring theme throughout his public life. This is not an isolated incident of a single reckless night, but rather the latest manifestation of a deeply entrenched, multi-decade battle against the severe physical tolls of elite athletic dominance. For over 20 years, the five-time Masters champion has subjected his body to forces that few human frames could possibly endure, resulting in a grueling series of complex back surgeries, reconstructive knee procedures, and a constant, invisible battle with chronic pain. The reliance on powerful medications like hydrocodone found in his pocket on that fateful March night is often the tragic, hidden byproduct of a relentless desire to remain competitive at the absolute highest level of professional sports. Over the years, the public has witnessed multiple vehicular incidents involving the golfer, each one serving as a sobering reminder of how thin the line is between extraordinary triumph and sudden catastrophe. From early morning collisions outside his home in years past to devastating high-speed rollovers that required intensive surgical reconstruction just to allow him to walk again. His history with vehicles has become an eerie mirror of his personal struggles, reflecting the intense vulnerabilities that exist beneath his outer armor of athletic immortality. When we examine the broader significance of this specific event, it becomes clear that this is about far more than just a misdemeanor driving under the influence charge or a missed chemical test. This situation strikes at the very heart of what it means to grow older under the microscopic, unforgiving gaze of the public eye while trying to manage a legacy that is almost too massive for any single individual to carry. The core of the matter lies in the delicate, agonizing balance between a professional athlete's fierce, unyielding pride and the sobering realities of a body that is breaking down after decades of unparalleled exertion. Insiders have repeatedly emphasized that the golfer's determination to return to the game of golf is not merely about winning more trophies, but about reclaiming his identity and proving to himself and to the world that his story will not be defined by a series of mugshots and traffic accidents. However, the path to that redemption is incredibly steep, requiring a complete overhaul of his daily routine, a masterful approach to long-term pain management that does not rely on dangerous narcotics, and a physical rehabilitation schedule that would exhaust an athlete half his age. The coming weeks will reveal whether the profound insights and structured discipline he gained during his 3 months in the secluded Swiss medical facility can truly withstand the chaotic, high-pressure reality of his everyday life back in the United States. At the center of this emotional storm stands a remarkable support system, led by a woman who is fighting her own monumental battle against a life-threatening illness with a level of grace and resilience that has inspired everyone around her. Vanessa Trump's journey since her breast cancer diagnosis in May has been nothing short of heroic, balancing the exhausting demands of rigorous medical treatments with her responsibilities as a mother and a supportive partner. The bond between Vanessa and the legendary golfer, which began to flourish publicly in early 25, has been forged in the absolute hottest fires of personal adversity, proving that their connection extends far deeper than the superficial glitz of high society. Those close to the couple describe them as two incredibly strong, mature individuals who have found in one another a rare level of mutual understanding and unwavering support that is essential for surviving a crisis of this magnitude. Vanessa's ability to remain a pillar of strength for her family while facing her own profound health struggles has provided the golfer with a powerful example of courage, serving as an emotional anchor as he attempts to navigate the treacherous waters of his own recovery and impending legal accountability. The impact of this journey extends beautifully to the next generation. particularly through the deeply meaningful relationship that has developed between the five-time Masters champion and Vanessa's daughter, Kai Trump. Since entering their lives in 25, the golfer has actively embraced a protective, nurturing, and deeply supportive role in young Kai's life, growing incredibly close to her during a period of immense personal and familial transition. For a young girl watching her mother battle cancer, having a stable, caring, and deeply attentive figure present in the home is of immeasurable value, providing a sense of security when the rest of the world feels completely unpredictable. The golfer's decision to briefly pause his own critical rehabilitation program in Switzerland to fly back to America was largely motivated by his profound desire to be physically present for Kai, to reassure her, and to ensure she felt completely loved and protected during her mother's most difficult medical treatments. This poignant aspect of the story reveals a side of the athlete that the public rarely sees, shifting the narrative away from the cold text of police reports and legal filings and toward the warm, authentic reality of a dedicated family man who prioritizes the emotional well-being of his loved ones above all else. As the calendar pages turn and the critical date of July 7th approaches, with an undeniable, heavy certainty, the global sporting community and the public at large are watching this unfolding drama with bated breath. The upcoming court appearance in Florida represents a massive legal hurdle that must be cleared before any realistic thoughts of a professional comeback can even begin to take shape. The defense team will have to carefully address the serious charges of driving under the influence with property damage and the refusal to submit to a lawful chemical test, navigating a legal process that will be covered intensely by every major media outlet in the world. Yet, regardless of the legal outcomes that await him in that courtroom, the true test for this legendary champion will take place in the quiet, private moments of his daily life as he strives to maintain the sobriety, physical health, and mental clarity he worked so hard to achieve in Switzerland. The journey of recovery is a lifelong marathon, not a sprint, and it is a path that must be walked one single day at a time, away from the thunderous applause of the galleries and the blinding lights of the cameras. Ultimately, this profound and deeply moving saga reminds us all that even the most accomplished, powerful, and revered icons among us are fundamentally human, subject to the same physical frailties, emotional vulnerabilities, and personal missteps that define the shared human experience. The story of this legendary golfer is no longer just a story of unparalleled athletic dominance, historic victories, and sporting perfection, but rather a far more complex, deeply human narrative about survival, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of redemption against seemingly impossible odds. As he stands on the threshold of a deeply uncertain future, surrounded by the love of Vanessa, the devotion of young Kai, and the lingering hopes of millions of fans worldwide, the world can only watch, wait, and hope that this embattled champion